Hi, everyone. As you can see, Mark Miller has once more been gracious enough to come and talk to us about all things comics. And you have a lot going on. There's just everything. We talked about 10 months ago, I feel like, and it feels like so much has changed, even just in the span of 10 months. So, how are you doing?
It's ridiculous, like I think I just enjoy it so much. I keep writing
Mhm.
comics, and I just have so many coming out. I do have to slow down, do have to slow down. It's getting too expensive for people who like my stuff.
Because just the other day, like we're going to talk about Psychic Sam today as well, but I know Huck was back with Huck Big Bad World. There's just so much coming out. So, what have you been having the most fun working on?
I think Psychic Sam, actually, the Kickstarter is really exciting because I've never done
Mhm.
anything like a Kickstarter before, and I've watched a few of my friends do it, and it looks really cool. It seems like the kind of thing Stan Lee would have done in the '60s if such a thing
Mhm.
existed. The idea that it's you and the reader, and there's
Mhm.
nobody in the middle, because you've normally got a store, distribution, a company, the marketing department of a company, and everything.
Mhm.
No, it just being you and the reader. There's something actually weird about it. It's kind of and you can see every sale as it's happening and everything. So yeah, I'm really enjoying
Mhm.
it. It's fun.
I was reading through a bunch of the tiers and the like, and I did get a chuckle out of the "Do you want to be murdered by Psychic Sam" tier.
That was actually my editor's idea. She's and she seems so nice. Like her favorite movie is The Lion King. She
Mhm.
collects like, Little Mermaid stuff and all that. But then she'll come out with stuff like that in a meeting, and I'm like, okay. So.
But clearly, she's rooting for the villains in those movies.
But my favorite thing in the tiers, actually, because
Mhm.
really happy with the book itself. Love working with John Romita, who's was my hero growing up. So getting to work with him is amazing. And Klaus Janson, who is like my favorite inker of all time.
Mhm.
But the thing I'm most excited about, and I think you'll probably appreciate this, is one of the tiers we have is a 1970s style Marvel magazine kind of format.
Oh, cool.
And when I was a kid, I'm probably one of 3 people on the planet who care about this kind of thing. But when I was a kid, because I grew up in a foreign country, didn't live in America, the way they packaged American comics for us was to put it together into black and white magazines with a
Mhm.
pink cover, and. So for me, that feels like a proper comic in a weird way.
Mhm.
So it's a newsprint inside, and
Oh,
it's
nice.
a painted cover by Dave Dorman, the Star Wars legend, on the
Mhm.
front. So it looks like the kind of thing you'd have got in the newsstand when I was about 8 years old. And I
Mhm.
want to do that with all my books now. I don't know if it's ridiculous, but if people like it, what I'll do is I'll go back and do it in even old books like Kick-Ass or something, and do that magazine format. Like,
Mhm.
see if you're a middle-aged man, that's like a fast car. It's really exciting.
I think it's cool to see those things. I recently got a copy of one of the authentic editions releases of the Chamber of Chills, where they had put together an anthology,
Yeah.
but they had done it in the style of those old 1950s. So it had the same formatting, the same
Yeah.
ad spacing. And I just thought that that was so fun, a way to really kind of get into the spirit and the vibe of it.
Yeah, those facsimile editions that Marvel and DC do of classic comics, nobody
Mhm.
can afford the $50,000 or something
Oh,
you might
gosh, yeah.
in these books. But you to actually have something close to it is really exciting. So
Mhm.
so yeah, there's comic people are really nostalgic. Like I'm super nostalgic, and I love every era. But
Mhm.
that was a particular sweet spot for me because it's my own childhood, and it was the
Mhm.
format I saw this stuff. Like I never saw Marvel and some DC characters in color. Like, I didn't see that for
Mm.
years. So I had them as different colors in my head. Like
Mhm.
Fantastic Four didn't have blue costumes. In my head, they'd red costumes. I assumed
Mhm.
they were red. And then when I saw them in color, I was like, whoa, this is not.
Do you kind of wish they were red?
This is gonna be pretty cool, yeah.
I remember there was one run where they did change it and they had kind of an orangey reddish for a bit, and just
Yeah.
people were like, "No, change it back. We don't want it. It's too
It's a great
far."
marketing trick, though, because I mean, when I was at DC, everyone used to do this all the time, and you would basically change a classic costume into something else, and
Mhm,
everybody's oh my god, and everybody's talking about it, and the sales spike, and it's the first appearance of the new costume, and then
mhm.
everybody comes to hate it because they missed the old costume, and then you have another sales spike when you bring it back, and it weirdly never fails. Like it's always interesting.
Mhm. It's one of those things where people say like, "Oh, like, we're not all that interested in the costume." Like, "Aha," until people change it. And
Absolutely, yeah.
then we shall see. So for the people who do not know or may not have seen the Kickstarter, tell them a little bit about what Psychic Sam is all about.
It's a fun little concept, actually. You know, the idea is really simple. It's if somebody whispers in your ear, if you had a sort of message from something, you know, that you don't know what it is, but something whispers in your ear and says, this guy is going to kill a nice person tomorrow at 7 p.m. unless you go and kill him first. And you're like, this is crazy. Am I going nuts or whatever, you know? So Sam ignores it, and then the innocent person dies. And then the next day, this happens again. And then the next day, and the bodies start piling up until he's like, oh my God. And then he hears about a crime so terrible that's going to happen the following day that he's like, I have to do something. So he picks up a baseball bat and he goes round to a bad guy's house. And that's where the story begins. It just goes crazy from there. Like, I can't believe where the story goes, but it's for people who like The Punisher and Death Wish and all that kind of thing, you know, it feels, in terms of like the culture right now, it does feel very like the 1970s, you know, where we're just, you know, all the cities feel like on the brink of financial collapse and everything, you know, that everybody's all arguing with each other and everything. And sometimes when things are crazy like that, those characters that have a really simple solution to problems, like Death Wish or The Punisher, they all sprung from that early 70s chaos. And this feels like a kind of good time to do something like this. And I love those vigilante characters anyway. And Johnny Romita draws them like no other.
What do you find fun about working on them?
There's something very, you live vicariously through the characters, I guess, don't you? You know, because real life is very complex and there's shades of grey. And even the worst person you've ever heard of has had a tough childhood or something like that, you know, and you can find human empathy in most people. But there's something just really nice about seeing bad guys getting blown away. There's something fine about it, you know. I mean, if you think about it, Bruce Willis in an action movie is essentially a serial killer. You know, he kills 150 people in a film, but you still feel kind of good, you know, because black and white level justice is being done. And I kind of like writing stuff like that. I rarely do. So it was really fun to go and do my version of The Punisher, I guess.
Because there is that level of escapism to it. And I know it's not for everyone. Like, some people worry that it takes on too much of a realistic edge. Like, what do you think about stuff like that?
I never worry about that because, you know, I remember when Kick-Ass was coming out, loads and loads of interviewers when we were doing the junkets said, are you worried that, you know, people in real life are going to copy this? And I was like, look, the guys who read comic books and the guys who watch the kind of movies I like they're not going to fight anyone. They're not going to murder anybody. Like, we're the nice guys, you know. It's like it's never going to happen, you know. So like, but the side, you know, so it's like anime, isn't it? You know, like all the anime is like super violent and everything, you know. The kids who watch it are really nice kids. They're never going to copy this, you know. They're not the ones you have to worry about. The crazy stuff you have to worry about, you know. So yeah, I'm always very relaxed about it. Like, I mean, the classic example is somewhere like Japan, which has got the lowest crime rate in the world, you know, the lowest violent crime rate, but the most violent culture, you know, in terms of even kids' cartoons and everything, you know. Yeah, I really don't believe there's a correlation. If anything, I think it's actually quite cathartic. It gets out, and repression, actually, if anything, I think leads to violence.
I hear that this is also being developed to be a movie. Did that impact how you approached writing it?
Well, I think what happened was I was offered a gig at DC, and I was offered a gig at Marvel. And as you know, like you, I'm the ultimate fanboy. You know, I mean, if I turn this around, you know, you'll see just all my toys and lunchboxes and all this kind of stuff. So even though I haven't worked for those companies for a long time, you know, a decade and a half, there was a little itch, you know. I was like, will maybe do one more of those projects. So I was actually in Oman, out in the Middle East, a year and a half ago or something, and the kids were in a boat, and I was swimming in the sea, out in the middle of the sea. And while I was out there, I had this idea for a Superman story, and I was like, oh my God. It literally came to me fully formed, and I was, wow. And I came back to the boat, and I scribbled it down on a wet pad that was in the boat. And I mentioned it on Twitter, and then the boss of DC got in touch and said, look, saw you on Twitter. Do you have a Superman story? And I was like, yeah. I said, well, we'd love to do this. So I was like, that'd be cool. And then Marvel, weirdly around the same time, CB Cebulski met me for lunch and said, look, we'd love it if you come back and did like a big crossover, just a big event like Civil War. And I had an idea for something that was pretty damn cool, you know. And I was like, I only have time to do one of these. And I got a carve out from my schedule at my day job, you know, from the studio. And I thought, I can take 12 weeks. I could write one of these things. And then when I sat down to write it, I come up with Psychic Sam instead. So I don't know, Johnny Romita, you know, you can't help what hits your brain, isn't it? You know, and the whole thing came to me, and I said to Johnny Romita, I've found the project you and I do after Kick-Ass. We've done Wolverine, we've done Kick-Ass. This should be a project, and I'm so buzzed up about it. And I said to him, let's do it. And he was like, absolutely. So he started drawing. And just by chance, Guy Ritchie's producer, a guy called Ivan Atkins, said to me, look, do you fancy working together? We've been talking about doing something at some point. And he said, anything on the cards? And I was like, I've literally just done a new project. I've got the whole thing plotted out start to finish. And I told him about it, and he was like, I want to make this movie, So, guys, they're doing all my favorite things just now. Have you seen The Gentleman, the TV show?
I haven't watched it. No, I didn't yet.
Oh, listen, you're in for a treat. You shouldn't even be talking to me. You should go and watch it. It's so good. And they also did Mobland, which everybody's loving right now, Pierce Brosnan show. And they did Wrath of Man, which I love, and just tons of great films. So I was like, okay, this is in good hands. So I've been working with those guys, and the screenplay is getting written right now, which is really exciting.
So what happened to that Superman idea then? Are you holding on to
it? Yeah, it's still there. Yeah. So I'll either do it for DC at some point, or Superman in 9 years' time is public domain. I'd like to write it before 9 years' time. God knows what world we'll be living in then. AI controlling everyone and all that. But in Superman is public domain in 9 years, and it would work with the classic Superman. The story actually works okay. I wouldn't have to do much, but at the same time, you also, when you're playing with Superman, you want to be able to play with all the toys,
all the things that come with him. Yeah.
Because that's my favorite thing in the world. And I know everything about Silver Age, Bronze Age Superman. That's well, and I brainwashed my children to be into it and everything. So I think I might have told you before, but my middle kid during lockdown read every single Superman comic, and action Superman, everything from 1955 until 1968, and still refers to the 1970 revamp of Superman. She refers to that as the new stuff, which is hilarious because she was 9 at the time. That's the new stuff. Yeah.
So is she all hyped up for the summer of Superman?
She is. She's over Marvel a little bit, actually. I can't get her excited about Fantastic Four, although I am. I'm obsessed with it. But Superman, DC's never really, in the last 25 years of superhero cinema, outside of Batman, DC's never quite stuck the landing with a lot of the stuff. Like those DC movies, they felt like cultural misfires, like Green Lantern and things like that. And the Flash movie and everything. They just never had that hit rate that Marvel have got. So it almost feels like they're an unknown quantity, which is very exciting to an audience, isn't it? Like we haven't really seen much of the DC characters the way that we're down to Rocket Raccoon and all that with Marvel. so the idea of this untapped DC universe is actually really, to me, very exciting because that's my favorite thing growing up.
Well, I've just been really enjoying it because all of a sudden people are taking an interest in the characters that I've always taken an interest in, like some of the obscure ones. We're like, who's Metamorpho? Who's Mr. Terrific? They're like, Superman has a dog. I'm like, yes, it's Krypto's time. So
and that amazed me. That to me is so, since I was a baby, I've known that Krypto existed. I'd see him in cartoons and things. But the number of people who said to me, when did Superman get a dog? Is so weird, isn't it?
It made me realize how much they'd pulled back from that. I was like, I didn't really notice how sidelined Krypto had gotten. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess they didn't really play with that stuff for a little while. They're starting to again, which is fun though.
Well, I love the Super Pets movie. I went to see that with the kids 3 times. Like we really loved the Super Pets movie. I thought it was so underrated. Actually, did you see it? Did you?
I did. Yeah, like we watched it with my kids, and they were super disappointed when they learned that Wonder Woman didn't actually have a pig. So.
Not yet, maybe. Yeah.
There's still time.
I was kind of surprised they did that because Wonder Woman had a kangaroo, didn't she?
Yes. Yeah. But that might have been a bit more difficult to work into the little place they were staying. Yeah.
But no, I loved it. I thought it was really great. And, I love the idea of stuff that I could never have imagined in the last 25 years. I could never have imagined an Iron Man movie when I was a kid. I mean, a Batman movie seems far-fetched. But Iron Man, but here we are now with Metamorpho and things like that. It's brilliant. I was talking on a podcast the other day, actually, and I was saying, it only occurred to me while I was talking, which was that it's very clever what James Gunn is doing here, because we think it sounds like a risk doing Silver Age Superman, but Superman in its 87-year history, whatever, 87-year history, the most popular period is the Silver Age in terms of mass readership. So Superman's selling a couple of million copies every issue. Whenever it was Crypto the Superdog and Mr. Mixes-Pitlick and the Fortress and everything. Actually doing all that in a film, maybe you're tapping into what people really want from DC. Because I don't think they want that dark DC, really. I think they want that quite fun, high imagination DC.
Yeah, exactly, like the adventure. Because when people tend to think of the Silver Age, it's very easy to jump to the more like outlandish and ridiculous part of the Silver Age, which is a lot of fun. But that kind of undercuts what's building that up, which is that really imaginative type of storytelling where pretty much anything can happen. Like anything you can imagine could happen in the Silver Age. They would just find a way to work it into the code somehow. So
and now with technology, any crazy idea can be visually done as well. So to have Superman have a giant ant head or one of the things Red Kryptonite did to him or something. I mean, imagine Christopher Reeve's Superman trying to do that. It'd be impossible, wouldn't it?
I'd have to build like a giant prosthetic and everything. I'd have to wear it.
And I love that now you can just do it, so you can have Streaky the Super Cat. There's going to be Super Horse, I think, in the Supergirl movie and everything. So
oh gosh, Comet. The world will get to know about Comet. So.
And I think kids will love that. Like my children will absolutely love the idea of a super horse. Like a girl riding a super horse. That's like their dream. They would love it.
That's one of the things I like about sharing comics with the kids is it helps keep some of that cynicism that can creep in at bay. Like when the crossover was recently announced for DC and Marvel, where they're going to do like Deadpool and all that stuff. Yeah. And I got a bunch of comments of people being like, oh, like the most oversaturated characters, so obvious. But then I told it to my 8-year-old and she was like, wow, they're going to be in a comic together.
You're exactly right. We kind of forget it's oversaturated to us because we've seen it so many times. But if you're a new reader or a kid especially, that's incredibly exciting. Plus, sometimes the obvious thing is the thing to do. Like in 1976, Marvel and DC had their first ever crossover. So, of course, it was Marvel's biggest character and DC.
Spider-Man. Yeah.
Superman and Spider-Man. Of course you're not going to make it anything obscure when you're trying to do the biggest sales boost of the decade.
Yes. And it's funny because when people look back at those early issues, they don't look at it through that lens of, oh, these would have been the most popular characters at the time. It's like, oh, wow, look, this crossover happened. And like they were able to get it together.
And then later, in the early 80s, there was Batman Hulk. But you forget, you had Steve Englehart's Batman was huge at the time, just before it. And then you had the Hulk television show. So it's funny, we kind of forget what used to be the number one characters. I mean, it was really 1979 or something before the X-Men even started to get into its groove. And the Fantastic Four, I've got a lunchbox up there from the 70s with Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was as big as Wolverine, in the 60s and 70s. That was Marvel's premier book, maybe even slightly ahead of Spider-Man for some periods.
It's exciting to see people get excited about all of these like characters again. It's nice to see people care about Galactus and things like that.
It's weird. I mean, the guy who plays Galactus, I know a little bit. He was in one of my films. And it's quite weird, when you've sat and had a pint with Galactus, it's weird because it used to be the barrier. It used to be I would go to the cinema and I would see Christopher Reeve or Tim Burton's Batman or something, And now my world's slightly blended into that where, I'm pally with Flash Gordon and all this, It's like I've kind of tipped a little bit into the fictional world now, it's strange.
So you're really busy. You're wearing a bunch of hats. You're doing a bunch of things. Do you have time to keep up with like what's going on like the month-to-month comic book scene?
Yeah, I think the internet's great for that though, because you see the chatter, even if you don't see the comic. And I read all the previews, I always
I
love
do too.
And I think you can tell by page 2 if you're going to enjoy something. So I quite like those 5-page previews you get online, so I keep an eye on things, and I think there's something really interesting happening because DC's been asleep at the wheel for quite a long time, like I think they've gone through quite a rough creative patch over the last maybe 5-6 years, but my God, this year they've completely woken up. I mean, Scott Snyder's Absolute line has been transformative for DC. It's been amazing, But I think it maybe started a couple of months before that with those digest size, manga size.
Yes, the small ones. Yeah, the compacts.
What a brilliant idea! It was kind of like, I don't know. It was like somebody had just shoved some adrenaline into DC, and they woke back. They're coming up with all this great stuff, So the regular monthly books are looking really good. The Absolute books are looking even better. Then they're trying out interesting things with the new formats. And you could tell me, I was in the States a few weeks ago, but I didn't see these. Somebody said to me, there is sort of magazine-size editions of DC Comics appearing in local grocery stores and things. Have you heard about this?
I've heard it. I have not seen it because, of course, I was like, well, I'm on the alert now. Like, are they around? But no, I have not. Still just in like the comic book stores and bookstores, at least where I am. But we'll see. That would be great. I've always felt that they should pop, honestly, into like a Five Below or one of those kind of like dollar store-ish places, because then their price point matches with everything else that's in there. And it makes a lot more sense to be able to just like, oh, I'm here and this is $5. This is also $5. And so then, you know, it kind of matches.
And, you know, when I was a kid, DC Comics, especially Marvel Comics, used to get repackaged, like I said, in the UK. So you get them much cheaper if you waited 3 years. So like the American price was always the highest price. But then when it got repackaged 3 years later in a black and white newsprint kind of format, you would pay probably about half as much for it. And I wonder if there's maybe a market for that, you know, where you don't need to get it in the grocery store the day it comes out. That could maybe be the specialist comic store market. But then you maybe do some classic DC runs or something and bring them out, you know, for casual reading.
And I think that phrasing is really good, the casual, because it's like not everybody needs it the first day. Like some people are interested, but they're okay, you know, waiting a week or so or however long and just catching up as they go.
Plus, also, I mean, like I said to you, when my kids were reading the classic Superman, they had no idea it was old. They'd read about 3 years of it before they realized it was old. And I think they just assumed that's how Americans dress. You know, they wear hats and suits.
They're going to be disappointed. Like, oh, they don't look like that.
We took them to New York a couple of weeks back. And they hadn't been to New York. We've been to America lots, but not to New York. I always felt it's kind of a bit of more of a grown-up city. So there wasn't a lot for kids to do when they were little. But now they're getting a wee bit older. They loved it. And because I think they've seen it in Marvel movies and all this kind of thing, like Grand Central Station is where the Avengers were fighting and everything. So for them, it was like walking around a movie set. They loved it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think that there's going to be all these different kind of cultural touchstone points based on where people entered. And that's a lot of fun. It's just so great to see that everything is still, I guess there's still so much steam behind it. Because for a little bit, there was a period where it was kind of deflating, or it looked like, but it feels like it's getting reinvigorated again, just across the board.
Yeah, I think COVID definitely didn't help as well. You know, COVID made shooting really expensive. And then on top of that, you didn't want to invest 250 million in a film if you could get shut down, because then the cost became insane, you know, when you tried to keep everybody from going off and working and other things, then getting them all back again. So those big expensive movies just almost didn't happen for a while, and the ones that did, I think, suffered as well. You know, they weren't. Plus, I think there was, you know, some bad decisions made as well. You know, but I think everybody seems to be course correcting in a good way. I think like DC movies looking great, and Marvel, I feel Fantastic Four feels like a bit of a turning point. You know, for I think hopefully this is the beginning of, you know, another great wave of things. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. That's the thing. I'm like, I'm interested. I'm invested to see where things are going.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, on top of that, though, I'm just excited about cinema in general. Just now, you know, everybody was talking like the $1 billion movie was gone. I mean, every article I've read for the last 2 years was saying that we have to recalibrate what we expect a movie to do and everything. And then Lilo and Stitch is going to make probably 1.3 million thereabouts. You know, it's doing gangbusters. And then on top of that, Minecraft's just under the $1 billion and everything. Like, so I feel as if the cinemas are filling up again. It's starting to feel a bit more 2019 when I go, which I like.
It's also nice to feel that they're targeting the younger demographic again, like also in comics too. And I'm like, that's so important, because you can't have that generational gap of people who just don't care because they weren't introduced to it. Yeah,
that's where they break the hobby as well. You know, like if you know, I don't know if you know this, but in the UK, there was a really thriving comics scene for like 40 years, for a long time. And so comics in a country that's maybe 1/6, 1/5 or 1/6 the size of America, we would sell 150,000 copies a week of modest level titles and 2 million a week of the big ones, which is crazy. A country of just 54 million people probably. So it's really amazing that there was a great comic culture. But what they did was they broke the habit. Somebody came in and looked at, there was comics that were aimed at 4-year-olds, and then comics aimed at 9-year-olds, then comics aimed at 14-year-olds. And the idea was you graduated onto the next one, But whenever they forgot about the younger generation, they ended up like just focusing on the big money older kids, And then they didn't have a new wave of people coming through because the little kids hadn't get into the comic buying habit. So, so it's so important because you grow your audience from the minute they can spend money. Yeah.
It's one of those things because there's an attachment that can form. Like, even though I came to it later, like the actual collecting part of comics, like I knew who the characters were because you see them around in adaptation and other things like that.
Yeah. I mean, you were through the animated series, weren't you? You came in through Batman, the animated?
Yeah. That was what allowed me to have the familiarity to be able to like go and pick up and like, I know who these characters are. Cause like some of them, especially at the time, because that was the era when everything was a trade, which is normal now. But at the time it was just like everything is going to be a trade. And so you could just go and be overwhelmed by like the amount of things on the shelves.
I wonder if that's been a mistake. Actually, that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about that. I wonder, like when I was a teenager, only like the absolute cream got to be a trade. So it would be Frank Millar's Batman or Denny and Neil Adams doing Green Lantern, Green Arrow or something, so it was like real prestige projects get put into a book. So you knew when you sort of looked through the shelf in the local bookstore, even outside of comic stores, you were probably getting something great. It had been curated for you. But then when it's just everything, does that make it overwhelming for new readers? Did they walk in and think, oh, to hell with this, I'm not even going to look,
I think they might not know. It makes it a bit harder, I think, to know where to start unless you already have some kind of entry point. Like maybe not into the comic itself, but even just to like, who is this? Or like, who wrote this or who drew this? Like if you go in completely with nothing, then it can be a bit difficult to just go in and just be like, I'm going to pick this, and go from there.
It's funny the number of characters that also don't have a definitive run. The way Batman's got about 10, 15 really classic comics. If you wanted to buy it, there's Batman Year One, Dark Knight Strikes Again, whatever, any of these books. But there's a few characters that you wouldn't be able to just hand over a graphic novel and say, oh, here's the best ever, story for that character. So I always think that's quite an untapped thing. That could be super valuable for companies to have at least one book that you could hand over with their best characters.
I think you see that a little bit with the compacts. Because you can see they're being very selective about what's going into the compact editions, at least at the start, which I appreciate because it's like when I was going through, I had most of them already, but I was like, oh, these are good like starting points for people who might not be familiar. And the quality's still good, even though it's shrunk down. It's just I'm used to the big size now. I'm like, I need it big. So.
This is the kind of nerdy thing that I would do, but I haven't done it yet. Is have you measured the lettering against
I have not.
Have you had any problem reading it? Have you found that when it's shrunk down, it's okay for you? Yeah.
I found it's okay, but I do find that I can feel it a little. I'm like, I am kind of like squinting a tiny bit. But I'm like, I also already wear glasses, so I'm not sure if I'm the best measure.
I got my first pair of glasses a year ago. I'd never had glasses before, and I got my first pair. And I only have to wear them when I'm reading. But I always forget that I need them, and I never take them. So they're always just sitting in the house. And then I'm on a train or something, and I buy a book, and I can't read it. So like, I need to remember that I wear glasses.
You got to get a cool case for it or something eye-catching that stands out.
It just seems such an inconvenience to carry it around, and I don't want to get those little chains old ladies.
Were they attached? Yeah.
I'm considering it though.
So how was it working together with John Romita Jr. again?
Amazing. I mean, Johnny's timeless. Like I always kind of forget that Johnny. I mean, I'm middle-aged and Johnny's like, God, what is he? 14 years older than me or something? I mean, it's crazy. And when I was 7, I got a Spider-Man annual for Christmas. In the UK, we get big hardback annuals, Johnny had done the cover, and I didn't realize it was Johnny until years later when I was working with him. And I loved to tell him to make him feel old. I said, hey, Johnny, when I was 7 years old, you drew the cover to one of my books. And so the Romitas are like the Kennedys, aren't they? Like the Romitas and the Kubers are like the comic book Kennedys. They're the lineages, So getting to work with a Romita feels kind of special. And Johnny, I mean, how has he remained good? Because most people's powers dim over time, and Johnny just remains great. He's working with Klaus Janson as well. They bring out the best in each other, which is fantastic. So yeah, I've loved it. I mean, I got an email this morning with 6 new drawings in it, and I was like,
oh nice,
amazing. Like I love is getting up in the morning, switching on my computer, and there's always like some really cool stuff there, like because that fanon you never really disappears, so like So you see John Romita's name, you're like, oh, great. You know, and then you look and he's done 6 new images for you, and you're like, okay, perfect start to my day.
How far in are you guys? Because I know this is supposed to be 3 volumes in total.
I've written the whole thing. I've written all, and so the guys had the screenplay to work from as well. I wanted to make sure it was all done, you know. And Johnny is on about page 40, I think. So each volume's about 56 pages or something, and Johnny's on about page 40. So he's doing well. And Johnny's so fast. Like the legend is that Johnny, I mean, he can easily turn around an issue in 2 weeks, but the legend is that he turned around an issue of Amazing Spider-Man about 15 years ago. He turned around in 3 nights.
Oh, wow.
3 nights. I mean, people worry about AI replacing them. Johnny Romita is going to replace you.
So since you're done writing that, what are you working on?
Well, just now, what was I doing today? Actually, I went back and did some tweaking on the third one. It's funny you say that because I actually finished it months ago. I finished it at New Year. I carved out 12 weeks leading up to New Year. But I just thought of something this morning and I thought, you know what, I could tighten that little bit. And I went back and I spent today, you know, sometimes it feels like a waste of time, you know, because you finish the project, but then you think, I'd kick myself if I couldn't, if you can turn the screw one more time and just make it a little bit tighter, do it. So I took today off what I was currently working on. I've actually been mainly working on a film. We're going to announce this film, I think, in about 2 or 3 weeks, like quite soon. We're going to be announcing it, maybe the beginning of July. So I've been working on that, working on the screenplay with the writer, which is really good. So yeah, I think my day job's taken over a little bit. Like I've been able to, thanks to COVID, giving everybody 18 months off, I was able to do loads of comic stuff. But my day job at the studios are catching up with me now, you know, and I think next year I'll probably have quite a bit less time to do comics. You know?
I noticed that you named the company Side Hustle Comics on the thing.
It seemed too good. Like, and I saw this thing. There was a marketing campaign from one of the book publishers a few years ago, and they were talking about comics being cool, right? And they were talking about a graphic novel line that they were starting. I forget which book publisher it was, and they said comic books are literature's side hustle. And I thought that was pretty cool, right? But like, because I like that kind of pirate feeling of comics, that it's something you're not supposed to be doing or something you're not supposed to own. Your parents would disapprove. But I remember all the comic community going crazy at this, and they actually got it killed because they said it was so dismissive and disrespectful of comic books. They call it a side hustle to novels. I actually think there's something I like about it, so that's why I picked Side Hustle Comics.
Do you feel that comics still has that kind of rebellious edge?
Probably not. I think everybody doing it is over 50 practically. You know, so like, you know, everybody's grandchildren practically. You know, so I think that probably goes. But there'll be a new wave of people coming in, and that will bring it with it. You know, but I see guys like Denise Camp. You know, I think he's got a nice little edge to his work. You know, and he's relatively young. He's in his late 30s. And that connects with younger readers, you know, because to me, the primary audience really should be teenagers, you know, like that seems the perfect, I mean, you can love it all your life like we do, you know, but you don't want to wait till you're 40 to start reading comics. You know, I think when you're 12, 13, how exciting to stumble across these amazing libraries when you're that young. And you've kind of got time to read them. You don't have any money, but you have time.
But you do have the time, yeah, to actually be able to take a whole afternoon or something and just spend it reading. Whereas, like, if I do that now, there's like, I know I'm not doing something else, or there's guilt or something.
And yeah, I feel guilt as well, you know, and I think it's a bit of a parent thing, but it's probably an adult thing, isn't it? That you think, like, I remember when I was 11, and on a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, I would lean over and get a big pile of comics that I'd already read, and I would just lie and reread them, you know. And it's like, when was the last time you took, you know, 2 hours to reread a pile of comics? Like, never. You know, it's not since you were a kid, really.
I got sick like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I couldn't do anything. My husband was like, stop trying to do stuff. And so I went and I got like my old 90s Starman compendium. I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit here. I'm going to read Starman. And it was so fun. I was like, man, I miss having the time to do this.
It's a shame you have to be sick to take the time.
I know.
You know, that was the same. Like, I got COVID last summer, right? And I was actually not too bad. I was a bit sweaty and, you know, not feeling great. And I said to the family, listen, I'm going to lock myself in the basement downstairs. away from all of you guys. I'm going to do 3 or 4 days on my own, and if you could just leave dinners for me outside the door, but you guys stay back. I don't want you catching this in the summer holidays. And I literally had the best 3 or 4 days I've had. I really did. I read a lot of comics and I watched all the movies my wife won't watch, like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, all this stuff, So I had the best time. And I was really, by day 2, 3, I was actually feeling all right. I was just milking it.
Which comics did you bring with you?
I took down Alan Moore. I remember Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I took runs of things actually, and read them in succession. I took Frank Miller's Daredevil run, which is amazing. I mean, I hadn't read it since I was a teenager. So I sat and read his original early 80s run. Fantastic. And I read a lot of Silver Age Superman because I've got a lot of those. They're just over there, I think. I've got a lot of those 500-page editions.
Oh, yeah.
Big omnibuses, and they're really good to read actually, and that format actually it works really well in this because it's lots of little 8-page stories. Yes, I mean I had an absolute ball. It was great. I might even pretend this summer.
It's like, oh no, time to go back to the basement.
It's pretty good. I've turned the basement into a kind of man cave. We've got a cinema down there, and we've got a pool room, like for playing pool.
Oh, nice.
I've got a bar over in the corner, and I thought it'd be pushing it a little bit if I was drinking and all that while I was down there. I thought I have to pretend to be sick, But I got a few games of pool, played some darts, went and watched a few movies in the cinema and everything. So it was great. Yeah.
So since you're going to be getting a bit busier with the day job, are there any of your comic characters or comics that you really want to revisit before you get busy again?
Well, I have. We're revisiting Huck right now, which we're finishing up a lot of things. Like the Magic Order finishes. There's only one more issue of that. Vatican City only has one more issue to go. And then there's a new wave of things. You've got Huck has just started. Issue 1's just been out. Nemesis starts in August. And then a big new series at the end of the year, either December or January, I'm not sure, starting. And then I think next year I'll probably slow it down, probably do half to 2/3 of what I would normally do, I think, and then the following year probably less again, because we're shooting some things back to back. And I never want to do anything kind of half-cocked, I want to do my best what I'm doing, so I wouldn't want to rush it and do it in my tea breaks and things. And then we come back a year or so later beyond that. But sometimes it's nice to get a little break too and, just be a fan and just go to the store and pick up the books instead of writing them. So that'd be nice too.
Where are some of the things you're keeping up with as a fan?
I'm loving Ultimate Spider-Man. Excellent. Jonathan Hickman's doing a really good job on that. I'm reading the Superman books, the Mark Waid and Brian Hitch book I loved. I thought that was fantastic. The Last Days of Lex Luthor.
Yes. Yeah. It
was my 1970s Lex Luthor, which I really love. That Elliot Magan, Carrie Bates kind of Luthor.
Yes.
And the Superman books in general are very good just now. Tom King's Wonder Woman's good. Absolute Batman, excellent. I really like Absolute Batman. A lot of DC's actually. The Energon books are great, and I didn't grow up with that stuff. Like I was about 15 when, and it was 1985. I think that stuff really hit. G.I. Joe and all those things. I get no nostalgia at all for it. Like by 15, I was reading Alan Moore and Frank Miller and things, so I wasn't really into Thundercats and Transformers and G.I. Joe and everything. So for me, just the Darren Warren Johnson stuff in particular is phenomenal. It's great. So I'm enjoying that as something completely new to me. I had no previous knowledge of it, but really enjoying it. It's excellent. So it was the indie scene for about 10 years there. All the interesting books seem to be in the indie scene, but it's creeping back into the big two. And I actually think Marvel's going to flex their muscles again soon too. It's been a tired period for Marvel and DC the last few years. But DC's already woken up, and I think Marvel will be next.
I hope so, because I'm always really excited when everybody's kind of pushing each other and competing. I think that's good, that kind of healthy level of competition.
Well, it can go the other way as well, and I think because neither company was really trying, then they didn't really have any competition. It was easy to maintain the same sort of market share that they had. But then when DC suddenly wakes up, Marvel's kind of like, what the hell? So it's kind of like sports, isn't it? You don't really get one great player in isolation. You tend to get loads of great players all at once. And I think it's the same with creators as well, because everybody's sparking off each other. and they're, you know, on a competition level deep down, they want to do something at least as good as their peers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it makes you work harder when your peers are doing really good. I think this is a very healthy competition. It's great for readers.
No, definitely. I was reading through because I'm on a golden age kick right now. So I was reading through a letter that Alfred Bester had written. And in it, he takes this little section to talk about like Bill Finger and like what a great rival he is. And I just thought that was really
That's
cool.
amazing. Yeah, I love that. were you reading it digitally? Did you have a digital copy?
Yeah, it was somebody had uploaded a bit of his like autobiography that he was writing. It was complaining about how he didn't like writing for television. So
I mean, comics has always been spoiled with good creatives, but I mean that period when you had, you know, some of the best sci-fi writers in the world, ghosting, you know, under sort of ghost names, you know, like doing comic books, were absolutely amazing, you know. So yeah, all like that Ray Bradbury era of guys like that, you know, because Julie Swartz, I think, was an editor in comic books. He brought a lot of those guys in, and they
yeah,
made.
because he was such a big sci-fi nerd. Like he organizes the first world sci-fi convention, so he's just bringing all those people together, and they're all really trying, which I really appreciate. I'm like, no, it's not just like we're doing comics so we can do something better. It's like no, they're applying all of that to the stories, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, and it was a side hustle as well, you know, like it was nice steady cash for them, you know, when they write the novel or something, you know. But and that's where some of the great concepts came from, you know, like the Silver Age reinventions of the characters, you know, owed a lot to that era of writers as well, you know. So that was great.
That's one of the things I've been looking at is like the little weird things that get pulled through
Yeah.
that people don't notice. Like I was on this kick to try and see if people remembered the significance of why there's a Green Lantern and why he's a train engineer. I was like, because trains. So
Yeah, it's funny you think a train's been a relatively new invention when Green Lantern, isn't it?
it's like the train signal system. It would have been really exciting.
And that's obviously where the lantern comes from, you know, the energy
Exactly.
of the railway lantern, you know, which, do you know, I found one of them when I was a kid, like an old
Oh, really?
1930s. Yeah, we lived near a railway line. And I mean, this is in the 80s, right? But it had obviously fallen off the back of a train like in the 40s or something like this. And nobody bothered picking it up. My friends and I were walking along a railway track when we were 13 or something. And we found it. I took it home and I honestly felt like Alan Scott. It was amazing. I kept it in my bedroom because it felt magical because it was one of those old lanterns that hung off the back of a train. Yeah.
It's like hoping. It's like maybe one day it'll like talk to me.
I get that call, you know. I'm not brave enough though, you know. I'm scared of everything.
So how has the reception been to Psychic Sam so far?
Really good. It's funny because it's a blank piece of paper. It's like in comics you have your audience and everything, but Kickstarter's an entirely different thing. You know, you're almost starting from scratch because you know roughly your next comic will probably be roughly comparable with your previous comic sold. You know, your audience over the years tends to be pretty loyal, and anybody dropping off, there's usually some new people coming in. Whereas this is just no idea. You know, it's just like you put it out there and see what happens. It's not been sold through stores or anything. But it's been really good. You know, somebody said to us, I think I never followed these things, but there's something called like backer lit or something. I can't remember. And we were #1 trending on that for days.
Oh,
you know,
cool.
you know, in terms of like, you know, the thing trending on comics Kickstarter. So we've been at #1 for a little while. And, you know, we've easily met our goal, which is great. And, you know, been able to pay everybody, you know, like the inker, the colorist, the letterer, editor and everything. So there's lots of expenses that come with the comic. And I like to pay quite a lot of money, you know. So if I'm working with somebody, we pay way more than Marvel and DC, you know. So I like to make sure everybody's well paid, you know. So I'm pleased that all the expenses have been met before we're even anywhere near. You know, I think we're 6 days into a 43-day campaign.
Yes.
And we're good, which is great. Yeah.
I think I saw some fan art for it already too when I was looking for some background images. I was like, wait, someone already made like a little scenario of like Psychic Sam saving Christmas. I was like, what? It worked so fast.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to see that. And it's lovely putting something new out in the world. You know, I do love it. And then hopefully it catches on. I've got a good feeling about this. Actually, you know, when something's really fun to write, that's usually a good sign it's going to be fun to read. They came together really quickly, which is a good sign. And we've got our director for the film. So I think the film's going to be, I think it's going to be big. The director has worked twice with the actor that we want, just coincidentally, you know, and is really good friends with him. So he is going to meet with him, I think, the middle of June. and try and get him, and then we'll be able to go public with who they are. But that's exciting as well, So, I mean, people shun collectability, but I think collectability is actually really exciting. When I was a kid, I was obsessed. I would buy like 5 copies of a number one in the hope they were valuable and everything. But there's something quite cool about this because Kickstarter runs are really small compared to traditional mainstream publishing. It's a fraction of what you would. Although you make more money from Kickstarter than you do from mainstream publishing, the actual numbers printed is small. So I kind of love the idea that if we do a couple of thousand run or something like that of this book, they'll become ultra valuable when the movie comes out because these will be the first appearance of the characters in this tiny little. So I like the speculation side of it, and I'm the only guy who says they like speculators, but I love it. I think it's great.
I just don't like when speculation eclipses reading. I think that's the only thing for me. Like slabbed books sometimes make me sad when they're super old because I'm like, oh no, but nobody can read it because it's like inside the thing.
Well, do you know, I feel a bit like that with Superman's cape. I bought Superman's cape, like Christopher Reeve's cape. Yeah. And I've got it hanging up downstairs, but it's in a sealed glass case with lights in it and everything, up in my room downstairs. And like, but I also feel like that means I can't play with it and touch it.
You can't wear it.
So people come in and they say, "Can I wear it?" And I was like, "No, it's vacuum sealed in there. You can't." And sometimes a comic is meant to be read, just played with, and all that. One of my pals, he's got a fair bit of cash, and he's got 3 copies of the first appearance of Spider-Man, and Amazing Fantasy 15, and he's got one for his wall, right? So he's got it slapped on the wall, one for his long box, and then a reading copy that he keeps on his desk.
One to read, yeah.
Okay, this is too much.
That's one of the things I do appreciate about the facsimiles. I'm like, I know they're not the originals, but it's a nice way to get some of the older stories out there so that they can be read. The only thing I'm sad when the facsimiles don't have the letters column, but I'm like, as long as they just put the letters column in, that's so important.
Yeah. And it's amazing the people who read them. I interviewed Jeff Johns on my podcast last year, and Jeff told me something I didn't know about Richard Donner. And he said that Richard Donner read Golden Age DC Comics when he was a kid. You kind of forget. Of course, he would. He's exactly in the demographic. He loves sci-fi. Yeah. And he read Green Lantern, Alan Scott Golden Age Green Lantern, and there's something so cool about that, isn't there? That we're there picking that stuff up at the time. Amazing.
Yeah, like seeing that line and that fandom. And I think it's really cool when you see like the people making things are fans themselves. I think it's important because it brings a special level of love to everything.
But there's something, if I was a time traveler, I think I would love to walk down, Fifth Avenue or something in New York and look at newsstands. And I was in New York, like I say, a couple of weeks ago, and I saw what used to be newsstands. And they're still called newsstands, but they're selling drinks, energy drinks and everything now.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have walked down it in the 40s or something and to look and to see all Flash comics and to look over and see Detective Comics and all that, to see number 7 or number 25 and things like this. It would be amazing to actually see them for sale and kids picking them up. The only trouble is, back in the old days, like before we were born, in particular, they maybe only published about 10 books a month, so there wasn't a huge amount. Like one kid could easily buy the entire Marvel output of the month, maybe 2 or 3 comics a week, which is very affordable. And they were also pretty inexpensive at the time. But the trouble is, that means newsstands could also have every Marvel and every DC, and it could fit on one shelf, Whereas now that both companies bring out over 100 books between them, not even counting independent comics, like where do you begin for newsstands, So we'd have to rethink how we do comics,
Yeah, you'd have to pick and choose a little bit because of the ability of the specialty store, you can do that because they have all of that shelf space to just put everything up.
What do you think would happen if Marvel and DC just released old comics onto the newsstand, like issue 1 of Spider-Man, issue 1 of Fantastic Four or Batman or whatever, and just put them out there and didn't say anything, didn't say these are old comics or anything, they were just in Walmart and like the facsimile editions and just brought them out. Do you think people would respond to them?
I think kids would pick them up. I do think that they would pick them up. And I know some people say that they feel like, oh, the art and those things, but I don't think so. I really think that people would still respond to it as long as it still was like crisp and clean and like legible to the eye. I think that people would respond to it. And especially if they don't know that it's old, because then you don't have any of that,
Yeah.
kind of baggage that comes with, oh, old must equal bad or something.
You look at somebody like Dave Mazzucchelli, or somebody who's got quite a classic golden age style.
Mhm.
Even though his work is regarded now as like top of the game for anyone doing a graphic novel or a comic book, it'd be the same if you're looking at Alex Toth in the 1960s or
Mhm.
whatever. Like, there's a timeless quality to some work and some work is retro art as well that's really influenced by 1930s and 1940s people. It's only because we've got such a discerning eye that we can tell it's old, But the average person, it just looks like a heavily inked comic book. You don't know when it's from. So I wonder if DC and Marvel should try that. Like pick their most popular periods and just literally print that. Like Silver Age Superman, just start from 1958 or something like that. And just see what happens. Put it out.
Finally start reprinting Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane.
That was the number one book for my children. Like they loved it. And this is this must take feminism back 1,000 years. But they loved the rivalry between Lois and Lara. They loved the two of them competing for Superman's affections. Like my kids, when I was reading them to them at bedtime, they were on the edge of their seat and they were loving it. And the more awful things that happened to them, they loved it all the more. It was so weird.
It's one of those things where I feel like that's one of those moments where the adult lens is kind of taking over, and because you can think through it in a different way than you would when you're a kid.
But like the idea that Lois was trying to trick Superman into marrying her by discovering his secret identity, so she was essentially going to blackmail him. I mean,
yes,
about a third of the storylines is this, right? Because I read all 150 issues, right? And every third story was, if I can find out Superman's secret identity, I can force him to marry me. Lois was like, she could have been in Superman's rogues gallery. She was like a baddie.
It's like they have some of those issues there where they have the alternate stories or something where she marries Lex, and I'm like, this makes total sense. This is.
But one of my kids had a really brilliant observation about it, and she said Lois Lane used to date Lex Luthor, in this present day continuity, because he was a big deal. He was the biggest man in Metropolis, and then Superman comes along and she's into him. And one of my kids said, "I think Lois is just a social climber. She's attracted.
Clout chasing.
Yeah, she's attracted to status." And the same kid said to me, "I think Lana is the perfect person for Superman because she likes him for who he really is. She didn't mind when he was just a farm boy, and she loved him then.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something quite sweet about that child's eye view of it, isn't there?"
Mm-hmm. No, I love getting the perspectives on that. My eldest is getting a little bit edgier, and so she's starting to pick up the stuff she's not supposed to, like Rick Remender's Sacrificers. I caught her sneaking off my show, and I was like, no.
How old is she then?
She's 8.
What?
I like, put it back. I'm like, it's not time yet.
Oh my god! And did she read an issue? Did she get the whole issue?
She got further than I would have liked, which was to like the brain sucking part. I was like, okay, like we need some. But the thing was, she wasn't freaked out. She was really invested in it. She was like, well, what's gonna happen? Like,
I guess, I mean, I know you came into comics a wee bit later, but I think when I was a kid, I was reading stuff that was certainly aimed at teenagers when I was like 8. And it's doubly exciting, because it's pretty cool to get something a little early, isn't it? If you can get something like a movie or something, like it's almost a waste to wait till you're 18 to watch a Terminator or an Aliens movie. You want to see that when you're 12, don't you? And like RoboCop, I know so many people who saw RoboCop when they were like 8.
Yeah, I saw RoboCop super young, younger than I was supposed to. The scene of him melting is like in my brain forever.
One of my pals, he's a Muslim guy in Scotland, and his granddad barely spoke English, right? And his granddad used to look after him all the time, like because his parents were out at work, and his granddad got RoboCop for him, thinking it was a children's thing because he couldn't really speak English. He didn't read back or anything like this. And he was like, "Oh, cool, Batman, Superman, RoboCop, that kind of thing." And he, traumatized by it, absolutely traumatized.
I hear a lot of talk about, like the month-to-month kind of format of comics. Do you feel like that still holds up? Like there's still a place for it?
that's a really great question. Like, because we've changed the way we do everything now, haven't we? Like, the graphic novel has changed the way we look at serialized stories. We kind of want it all at once. And I, like, my wife and I are watching Mobland just now, and for the first time in ages, we were waiting a week between episodes, and it was driving us crazy. Normally, we let something run for 10 weeks or whatever, and then we watch it in one go, over a few days, because we're so spoiled now, aren't we? We like everything all at once, and it's quite unsatisfying to see things periodically. Because I'm a fan of monthly comics, that format still works for me, but that might be an age thing. Just growing up with it, I'm in the habit of that, and I like it. But my kids, I don't know how they would feel about waiting a month for part 3 of a 7-part story or something, So I hope it stays, because I think that business model is a good one. I'd love to see that continue to work. And you also get paid twice, which is amazing as well, because you have the monthly comic, which covers all your costs, and then the graphic novel comes out and it's pure profit, which is great for most people as well, So I hope it does. I really do. And I love... Now, here's a crazy thing. I don't know if you find this. You've got your big Starman compendium.
Yes.
Right? How heavy is that?
It's quite heavy.
So how do you read it? Like, what position are you sitting in to read that?
Okay, so it's like either it needs to have like a pillow or something under it, like if I'm sitting up so that's not directly on the lap, or it has to be some kind of like laying down and it's leaning against something, or like on the stomach. It's not, so you can't hold it up and read it that way.
I always read comics holding it up, because I love to lie back and just read a comic on the sofa or something, or in bed or whatever. And you hold it above you, and those compendiums, your arms start shaking and everything. you can't quite read them in the same way. So when I read a comic, even a graphic novel, the thickness of it just doesn't feel as pleasant when you're lying down as a little comic you can hold in one hand and flip the pages around and everything. There's something nice about lying back and reading a 24-page comic.
I think my favorite are trades. That may be because that's how I got into them. And so when I hold a comic, I find it a bit flimsy. Like, I'm always a bit concerned. I'm like, oh no, am I going to just like Hulk out and tear through it?
I guess it's what you're used to, isn't it? What you've seen, but the trade is probably the most satisfying way to read, I suspect, isn't it?
And I think that's the way that people may have been getting used to. As well, the chunk.
I was over in Copenhagen a few months back, and Copenhagen had the most amazing comic stores, and they were selling, those BD graphic novels, those European editions. And I kind of like their business model as well, which is you just bring out the graphic novel, there's no monthly book, and there's very healthy stores, with these original graphic novels everywhere. There's something kind of nice about that too. Like, I wouldn't hate it if it went that way, and it means that the comic stores, there's a model it can still use. But what I did see when I was in there, which I'm sure you've never heard of, and it blew my mind, was in Finland itself, there was a big American comic book scene in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So I saw Finnish editions in a country of only 5 million people. I saw translated Finnish editions of classic DC comics, and you couldn't have imagined there'd be a big enough market to bother translating it into Finnish. It must have been. I mean, it was decades this was being published in Finland, these old classics.
That's really fascinating. What's the furthest place one of yours has been translated?
Japan is the one that looks most alien. Like, I can speak bits of other languages, but Japanese I've got nothing. Absolutely. So whenever, it's kind of weird to see something you've written but you can't understand one word of it. German, French, Spanish, I can a little bit wing it a little bit, but Japanese, forget it. No, Korean even more so. When I see it in Korean, it's amazing.
So it's kind of like, this could say anything.
I do worry about that, actually. I do worry, because you're entirely at the mercy of the translator, aren't you? Entirely at the mercy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking some time. Sadly, I need to dash off, but thank you for taking some time to chat comics with us.
No, it's all. I'm actually off to watch Mobland episode 10. My wife and I we've given the kids the iPads. We said, look, we're going away for 40.
So you can enjoy it.
But listen, thanks again, and hopefully everybody's loving Psychic Sam when it comes out. The Kickstarter runs 38 more days or 37 more days or something, and hopefully volume 2 and 3 are just as successful. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I'll put all the links down below and people can find them there.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Sasha. Good to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
My name is Sam Nicoletti, and I see murders before they happen. A little voice tells me the killer's name and address. And if I stop them, I save a life. If I ignore them, an innocent human dies. What would you do in my situation?
Psychic Sam is a classic boys comic. It's about a guy with a big gun who goes out and solves problems. And he hears voices in his head tell him to kill bad guys. The only trouble is the bad guys haven't done anything yet. But every time he ignores it, someone innocent dies, and it's only a matter of time before the bodies start piling up.
I'm working with a guy named Mark Millar. Mark and I started on Wolverine together, and we got to create Kick-Ass, and we had a brilliant time. It changed our lives. So now we come up with a third collaboration, and it's called Psychic Sam, and I have the legend Klaus Janson working with me, and then the brilliant Bill Crabtree doing the color art. And we are having an all-out blast with this.
The big news is we're also doing a movie of Psychic Sam. There's a guy called Ivan Atkinson who's brilliant. He's Guy Ritchie's producer, and he's produced some of my favourite films from Guy. Wrath of Man, The Gentleman, all these amazing films Guy's been doing over the last few years.
Ivan Atkinson, yeah. I'm excited to be teaming up with Mark Millar and his exciting new project, Psychic Sam. Mark and I have been talking about working together for a number of years, and I found the project that I think brings fascinating characters and action together, reminding me of the films I grew up loving.
This is completely outside of Millar World and Netflix and all the stuff I've been doing for the last 20 years, really. None of those books will be affected, and all our new titles will still be out there every month. I just carved out a wee holiday for myself and thought I'd be doing something for maybe Marvel or DC again. Then I thought, wouldn't it be great to do some creator-owned with Johnny Romita Jr.?
There's so many great tiers to this, so many great levels to this. We're gonna do a black and white version with a painted cover.
Done in the style of a 1970s Marvel magazine, beautifully packaged in that big magazine-size format. There's hardcovers, there's t-shirts, there's trading cards, there's stickers.
Spectacular stuff. You can also get written and drawn into the issues, which would be a lot of fun. I have to do justice to all of you.
We're assembling a fantastic team of filmmakers on this production, and we will have some more information for you guys soon.
We just are having so much fun with the character. It's probably as good as it gets, but the fact that it's the third time with Mark, it's a charm.
I think there's something special brewing here, so don't miss it.
And thanks so much to Mark Millar for taking some time to talk about Psychic Sam and just all things comics. There will, as always, be more videos coming soon, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.